past decade, Disney feature animation has cultivated the art of the animated feature to a new status of popularity and artistic achievement. A status not seen since those classic films created under the supervision of Walt Disney himself. Timeless tales, beloved characters, and dazzling music have been brought to life by a dedicated group of artists who have truly created a renaissance of the animated art form. And all of this was made possible by one Little Mermaid. Come along with us, somewhere under the sea and beyond your imagination, for the beneath the waves and behind the scenes story of the creation of a modern Disney classic. The story of Disney's animated triumph, The Little Mermaid, actually begins in 1937, when Walt Disney created the animated feature.
Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is the film that begins the story of Disney feature animated cartoons. The Little Mermaid is kind of the film that defines the rebirth of Disney as a powerful force in animated cartoon production.
After Walt Disney's death in 1966, interest in the animated feature as an art form began to wane. But in the mid-1980s, Roy Edward Disney, Walt Disney's nephew and vice chairman of the Walt Disney Company, took on the challenge of reviving interest in the animated feature at the Disney studio.
Little Mermaid was one of those things that it was the perfect thing that happened at the perfect time, I think, in the development of the whole animation department in those years in the late 80s. We'd made The Great Mouse Detective and we'd made Oliver and Company, and everybody was kind of looking for something really good to happen, and Ron Clements brought in the story, Hans Christian Andersen's little story, and everybody reacted very well to that.
In the mid-1800s, Danish writer Hans Christian Andersen wrote a story about a shy little mermaid who falls in love with a handsome prince and sacrifices her life out of her love for him.
I thought this is great. I wonder why Disney has never done this. Of course, after reading the whole story, it's so sad and ends so tragically that might be a reason. But I had sort of an idea of a way to do it a little different way that might have a little more uplifting ending. So I submitted a two-page treatment at the next meeting.
Given the go-ahead to expand the two-page screen treatment, Clements brought in his Great Mouse Detective colleague, John Musker. Together, the two set about to adapt the Andersen tale into a Disney feature.
In terms of actually sitting down and writing a script together, this was the first time we did that, and in some ways the first time that in the modern era or whatever that we had used a script for an animated film.
One of the challenges that Musker and Clements faced was that The Little Mermaid was a fairy tale. And although Disney is famous for fairy tales, there hadn't been a Disney film based on one since Sleeping Beauty in 1959. In fact, The Little Mermaid would be only the fourth Disney animated feature based on a fairy tale.
So I think everyone felt a certain pressure because of that tradition of the fairy tales.
This return to the fairy tale, however, was much of the reason for the final success of The Little Mermaid. Another was its rediscovery of the movie musical, brought to the project by composer Alan Menken and his creative partner, the late Howard Ashman.
I felt that Howard would be a great match in a marriage for us because he really was a very passionate, charismatic artist who understood the use of music and how to use music and songs in storytelling. And Howard came to Disney and I think really provided us with the courage and the opportunity to push the animated musical in a new direction.
And Howard then called me and asked if I'd be interested in, getting involved in a project at Disney. I said, you bet. That was a no-brainer.
Well, Howard was very story-oriented, and he always thought the song should advance the story. So even in our earliest treatment, Howard had ideas for the way the songs could fit into the story.
Well, clearly, music has always been a very large part in the Disney animation movies, whether you go back to Snow White or Cinderella or Sleeping Beauty. Little Mermaid was the first movie we did that echoed back to the Sherman Brothers, having a resident team of artists, being Howard Ashman and Alan Menken, who really contributed all 7 songs, and were a songwriting team that gave the whole movie its style and scope.
It became an integral part of the storytelling. It was as if you can't take this music out of the picture because it is the picture.
First thing that Howard Ashman and I did when we worked on Little Mermaid worked on Under the Sea, was just to play with a rhythm. And only then came wanted a rhythm that just went around in a circle and fed back into itself.
Under the sea, while we're devoting full time to floating under the sea.
It was a gift. I mean, at that time, to have Howard Ashman, Alan Menken, Ron, and John to come together and to create a world that was perfect for Ariel to be born. And she was a gift for the world at that moment.
Glenn Keane, along with Mark Henn, would animate The Little Mermaid Ariel. But for Keane, securing the assignment wasn't easy.
Glenn had done a very powerful bear fight in The Fox and the Hound, and this seems to have typecast him briefly at the studio for doing heavy things.
I just couldn't think of animating any other character but Ariel, and though the directors wanted me to do the villain, they were asking me to do Ursula. I said, you know what, guys, I'd really like to do Ariel. And I remember John Musker saying, well, can you draw pretty girls? I mean, you do like these big bears and giants and Ratigan, and can you draw a pretty young 16-year-old girl? I said, well, yeah, I think I can. I'm flexible, you know.
What's your name?
Veteran Broadway performer Jodi Benson was cast as the voice of Ariel.
Glenn Keane and I were both the supervising animators on Ariel, and we would sit in on the recording sessions, and they would videotape Jodi, and we would just watch and hope that maybe in the recording session she was vocally bringing this character to life.
I've never seen a human this close. Oh, he's very handsome, isn't he?
It may give you something that you can incorporate into the character, which brings the character to life, makes it a little more believable.
Scuttle, look what we found.
Wow, this is special. This is very unusual.
What? What is it?
She does have, I think, a lot of my eyes and personality, especially when she's singing, and different types of mannerisms. She's a blend of 3 or 4 different people, but I can definitely see that they've picked up, my mannerisms and different qualities about me into the character.
Daddy, don't listen to her. Stop. Daddy, I'm sorry.
We made a deal.
Musker and Clements also defined a strong personality for Ariel's father, the Sea King, whom they named King Triton.
Another of the young stars on the animation staff is Andreas Deja, who's done wonderful work for a number of years now at the studio. And his character was King Triton.
As an animator coming onto a new character, whatever the assignment is, you try to find a hook. The hook is meaning, who is this character? Simple qualities, something you can hang your hat on. For King Triton, it was really not so much that he was the ruler of the ocean and that he was king, but he was a father. And to me, the movie really was about a father and his daughter, and the father having to come to terms with the fact that his daughter's growing up and she's her own person now.
As long as you live under my ocean, you'll obey my rules.
But if you would just listen.
Not another word.
King Triton is a portrayal of my own dad. A lot of the gestures that King Triton does really reflect the way my dad reacted to my sisters when they were started dating. This finger-pointing thing, you stay home, you know where you belong. I mean, my dad used to do this all the time. So it's kind of personal, in that way.
The Sea Witch, unnamed in Anderson's story, was developed by Musker and Clements into a central villain. They named her Ursula and gave her the slinky glide of an octopus.
The idea of her being an octopus was an idea that actually evolved. I think she went through many different incarnations. She started out as possibly a scorpion fish, a puffer fish.
Manta ray, there were some drawings of her with sort of the ray wings and all that, looking sort of more Maleficent-like. And even in some of the earlier versions, she was a svelte, skinny Joan Collinsy. At the time, Dynasty was big, and we had considered sort of her as a slight model.
Ursula finally slithered to life under the pencil of animators Rob Minkoff and Ruben Aquino.
So in terms of Ursula, Ruben Aquino took this live action of this octopi propelling itself along and dubbed on the track of the witch's song.
Poor unfortunate souls in pain, in need. This one longing to be thinner, that one wants to get the girl, and do I help them? Yes, indeed.
I looked at that, and it was great inspiration for both of us to see how you could take and adapt the moves of
the real creature and get this kind of funny, melodramatic movement to it. And he used it in the animation.
I will make you a potion that will turn you into a human for 3 days. Got that? 3 days.
I've had the most fun animating her of any of the characters I've ever animated. She's just so much fun. She's sleazy, slimy, slithery, and her personality's great. The voice was great. And, as they say, the voice is half the battle when you're animating a character.
Actress and comedian Pat Carroll provided the voice of Ursula.
We mustn't lurk in doorways. It's rude. One might question your upbringing. Life's full of tough choices, isn't it?
I don't know why it is, but for actors, to play a good person is very difficult. To play someone mean is heaven. It's a roller coaster. You can go wild. It's marvelous to play villains. I have not been cast as villains too often, and I think I'm a wonderful villain.
You belong to me.
No, Ariel!
New personalities not present in the Anderson fairy tale were also created to support the main characters.
Ariel, no! In our original treatment, we did have a crab character who was like the court composer, and we were thinking of a little bit of a Jiminy Cricket type mentor for Ariel. I think in our first treatment he was called Clarence, and he was kind of a little bit of a stuffy character.
At some point, Howard Ashman said to John Musker and Ron Clements, our directors, that it would be more fun if we could have a character who was Caribbean and could give us an excuse to write a reggae song, something with beat and a real production number values. And they said, great. He said, how about we make this character a Trinidadian crab?
We had questioned Howard a little bit about that because we were picturing him being this Jamaican crab, that he'd be very laid back and all that. Didn't seem like the character we were picturing. He said, no, I'm picturing someone very grand and very dignified and full of himself. And then we're like, oh, okay, I get it.
This concert was to be the pinnacle of my distinguished career.
Howard and I, of course, created the demo and the prototype for that voice. And Sam just picked up on that and ran with it and just did a great job.
Thank you.
Actually, before The Little Mermaid came along, I had this lifelong ambition, really lifelong ambition to do a Disney character. And then when I got an opportunity to audition for the thing, I went, this is ridiculous, I'm never going to get this, and I'm not even from Jamaica or Trinidad. I couldn't believe it. When I actually got it, I cried. It's my lifelong ambition. It actually come true.
Yes! Yes! Thank you. Thank you.
Every shell, bubble, and wave of the watery world these characters would inhabit had to be designed. Concept artists from the Disney team, as well as top contemporary storybook illustrators, lent their talents to creating this underwater environment. The animators even looked back to Disney's 1939 classic Pinocchio for its spectacular underwater sequence. It was also during this production period that veteran storyman Vance Gary made the filmmakers aware of a treasure trove of inspirational sketches preserved in the Walt Disney Archives. This art had originally been created for a version of The Little Mermaid planned by Walt Disney nearly 50 years before.
Walt, when he was making Snow White, was thinking about Hans Christian Andersen. And he had thought about The Little Mermaid. He thought about it pretty seriously, and had one of his great concept artists, Kai Nielsen, do drawings and sketches to set a visual tone for the film. Picture all these years later, the new young Disney team gets to work on The Little Mermaid and discovers this cache of artwork from the late 30s by the late Kai Nielsen. And they were overjoyed because there was really gold. A lot of solid ideas that they wanted to use and adapt, and they ended up giving Nielsen screen credit, even though he was no longer alive. But out of regard and respect for what he had done, the groundwork that he laid for them.
With these many inspirations, the art directors began experimenting with layout, backgrounds, and color to strengthen their support of the story. For the colors of the characters, great care had to be taken to compensate for changing environments and light. There were 32 color models for Ariel alone. The Disney Paint Lab even invented a new color, appropriately named Ariel for the blue-green color of her fin. Over the 3 years of production, The Little Mermaid drew on the talents of more than 400 artists and technicians. In the end, nearly 150,000 painted cells and 1,100 backgrounds, using more than 1,000 different colors, went into the making of the 7,000 feet of finished film. The Little Mermaid premiered in November 1989. It was acclaimed by the press and the public and set the box office record for the first release of an animated feature. On Oscar night 1990, The Little Mermaid swam away with 2 Academy Awards, Best Song, Under the Sea, and Best Original Score.
I think there was sort of an innocence about that film and the way we made it that's difficult to recapture in some ways, and I think that's what makes it so special, because it was in some ways the first of this sort of new wave for us.
I don't think anyone knew what we had. You know, we as writers and the animators as a group, nobody really knew what possibilities we had until The Little Mermaid.
It allowed the artists, or showed the artists, that if they dreamed big enough, that they could be successful.
We did something really wonderful. We look back and say, boy, you know, that started us down a wonderful track here, and we've got to continue to build on that. So I think it's not unlike the Walt's old original movies of Snow White and Bambi and Fantasia and so on. We look back at those in kind of the same way and say, here's something we have to live up to.
Complete. Wouldn't you think I'm the girl who has everything? Look at this trove, treasures untold. How many wonders can one cavern hold? Looking around here, you think, sure, she's got everything. I've got gadgets and gizmos aplenty.